One man rode into a town that thought it knew justice. He didn't ask for mercy, he didn't give any, and when the sheriff begged for his life, Clint said, "Deserves got nothing to do with it." The saloon was quieter than usual that night, not because of the storm outside, not because it was late, but because death was in the air and every man inside felt it before they heard the door creak open. The first sound wasn't Clint Eastwood's boots. It was the wind dragging dust in from the street like a warning. Then came the slow, deliberate footsteps of a man who wasn't supposed to be here, a man who had once sworn he'd given up killing, a man the town had wronged. William Money stepped through the doors of Greeley's saloon like a ghost with a heartbeat. His soaked coat clung to his shoulders, his hat low over those cold, calculating eyes. In his hands, a shotgun held with casual precision. Every conversation died mid-sentence. At the back of the room, a coffin lay open, the body of Ned Logan, Money's friend, displayed like a message, a warning, a sin. Hung, whipped, and murdered by the sheriff and his men. Money's eyes didn't flicker. He looked at the coffin. Just once, then he looked at the men responsible. Sheriff, Little Bill Daggett, stood near the bar, unaware at first, laughing with townsfolk and boasting about how law was kept by fear. That laughter drained from his face the second he turned around and saw Money standing there, dripping, armed, unblinking. "You'd be William Money out of Missouri," Little Bill said slowly, trying to sound brave. "Kill women and children, right?" Money didn't respond. The room tensed. Guns shifted in holsters. No one moved, because everyone knew what was about to happen, and no one could stop it. No one reached for a gun. Not yet. Not while William Money still had the shotgun raised across, his chest, barrel tilted slightly down but ready. That weapon didn't shake in his hands. It rested there like it belonged, like it was an extension of something deeper, something colder than revenge. Conviction. Sheriff Little Bill tried to keep his voice steady. "I don't deserve this," he muttered, almost to himself, as if trying to summon righteousness in a room that had none. He took a small step toward Money, slowly, his badge glinting in the lantern light, his confidence cracking like old wood, but Money didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply raised the shotgun and fired. The sound was deafening, explosive, like judgment itself had kicked in the door. The bartender, Skinny Dubois, was torn from behind the counter, his chest vanishing into blood and splinters. He hadn't drawn a weapon, he hadn't said a word, but he was the man who displayed Ned's body like a trophy. That was enough, for Money. That was more than enough. Panic erupted. Chairs toppled, drinks shattered. Every man in the room dove for cover, but none dared draw first. Not yet. Not with that figure still standing in the doorway, lit by lightning from the street behind him. Smoke curling up from the muzzle of the shotgun. "Any man don't want to get killed," Money growled, voice like gravel and thunder. "Better clear out the back." And they did. In a scramble of boots and curses, a dozen men ran, tripping over one another to escape through the rear of the saloon. The storm outside suddenly seemed safer than what stood before them inside. Little Bill, stunned, still hadn't drawn. He stared at Money like he was trying to understand the kind of rage that outlived grief. He tried to reach for his own gun, but Money saw the twitch, and the shotgun's second barrel lifted before instinct could catch up. "You killed Ned," Money said, finally breaking the silence that wasn't silence. It was tension. Raw, vibrating tension. "He was my friend." The air went heavy again. Not with fear now, but reckoning. And just like that, the second barrel roared, this time aimed at another deputy frozen beside the bar. The man never even got his hand to his holster. Now the room belonged to Money, and everyone left inside knew this wasn't revenge. This wasn't rage. This was balance being restored by a man who once walked away from violence and had been dragged back into it by people too stupid to let him be. Smoke hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. 2 bodies already lay lifeless on the saloon floor, and still William Money hadn't moved much. His shotgun now empty, he calmly let it drop to the wooden floor with a thud that echoed louder than gunfire. His hand, without urgency, moved to his holster. The room stayed deathly quiet. save for the shallow, ragged breathing of Little Bill Daggett, who now stood alone near the bar, face pale, revolver slowly being drawn like it weighed 100 pounds. He'd been the law here, the self-proclaimed judge, jury, and executioner, but now he looked small, shrinking under the weight of what he'd done, hanging Ned, torturing him, nailing that sign above his lifeless body like it was a prize. His righteousness was gone now. All that remained was fear, not of death, but of what was coming before it. Bill finally raised his weapon, just slightly, and croaked, "I don't deserve this." Money's gun was already drawn, already pointed. His finger rested on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. He took one slow step forward and answered, voice flat and final, "Deserves got nothing to do with it." Then, bang. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a funeral bell. Little Bill was thrown backwards, crashing into chairs and glass, his body convulsing once before going still. The bullet had torn through his chest, but it was those words that had killed him first. That line, stripped of emotion, was more than a statement. It was a verdict, because Money wasn't just executing a man, he was ending a lie. The lie that men like Little Bill, who enforce law with cruelty and wear justice like armor, are somehow immune to consequence. And now there were none left to stop him. No deputies, no cowards. No heroes, just a room full of the living trying not to draw breath too loud, and a dead man who learned too late that karma doesn't knock. It kicks the door in. Money holstered his pistol slowly, the silence wrapping around him again like a shroud. He looked down once more at the corpse of the sheriff, the man who thought cruelty made him strong. Then he spoke, to no one in particular. To everyone. His voice cold enough to freeze time. "You better bury Ned right, or I'll come back and kill every last one of you sons of bitches." No one answered. No one needed to, because William Money wasn't a legend. He was a warning. The thunder outside had finally faded, but inside the saloon, the silence remained thick, heavy, and unshakable. William Money stood among shattered glass, overturned chairs, and the wreckage of what had once been law and order. He didn't look like a hero. He didn't even look like a man proud of what he'd done. He just looked done. He turned his back on the room. No rush. No panic, just the same calm, deliberate steps he'd taken when he walked in. As if none of it surprised him. As if it had been written in stone the moment he saw Ned's body hanging cold and alone in the rain. The townsfolk outside had gathered in small clusters despite the storm. Word had spread faster than the lightning. He's here. The killer. The myth. The man from Missouri who once killed women and children, not because he enjoyed it, but because he didn't know better. Now he knew better, and that made him far more dangerous. The saloon doors creaked as Money stepped out into the street. The downpour had turned to a soft drizzle, the kind that coats a town in quiet shame. He mounted his tired horse without a word, adjusting the soaked brim of his hat, and looked down the road like it was the last stretch of a long, cursed trail. No one dared stop him. A deputy from another county, trembling under a store awning, raised his rifle halfway. Unsure, Money turned his head toward him, just slightly. "Any man I see with a gun in his hand," he called out, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the rain, "I'm gonna kill him." The rifle disappeared. Boots shifted. The cowardice that had filled this town returned to the shadows, because for all their talk of justice and law, no one had stopped Ned from being killed. No one had stood up to Little Bill. No one had fought back. It took a killer, an old, haunted one, to remind them that evil doesn't vanish when you put it in a uniform and call it law. And now that man was leaving, not as a savior, but as a shadow stretching across every conscience left behind. As he rode past the cemetery on the edge of town, the wind picked up. A wooden cross on a fresh grave tipped in the soil. Another life taken. Another lie buried. Behind him, the town stayed quiet, because when William Money came to collect, he didn't just take lives, he took everything a man pretends makes him. Right. William Money disappeared into the rain the way ghosts vanish into wind, without ceremony, without applause. No one followed him. No one dared. Behind him, the town of Big Whiskey stood still, broken in spirit, haunted by what had just happened inside that saloon. The blood had been mopped. The bodies buried, but the weight of truth remained. He hadn't come to be a hero. He hadn't come for fame. He came because a friend, a decent man named Ned, had been murdered for doing a job too messy for honor, and too cruel for silence. And no one had answered for it, so William Money did. He answered with lead, fire, and the kind of justice that doesn't fit neatly inside a badge, and then he left, not into the sunset, but into a gray horizon soaked in mud and memory. No one ever saw him again. Some said he went back to his children, to that quiet patch of farmland where he tried to forget the past. Others whispered he vanished into the hills, gun still strapped to his side, waiting to be needed again. But the truth? The truth is simpler. He left the town. But never left the legend, because years later, when people retold the story, they didn't remember the names of the deputies. They didn't speak of the saloon's fancy wallpaper or the rainstorm that night. They remembered the man who walked in alone, killed 5 armed men without blinking, and delivered a single line that echoed like thunder across the entire western frontier. Deserves got nothing to do with it. That line stripped away every excuse, every false sense of morality, and held up a mirror to a lawless world. It was brutal. It was cold. And it was true. Clint Eastwood's William Money wasn't the cowboy we grew up with, riding in white hats and riding out to cheers. He was something far more honest. A man shaped by his past, burdened by it, who chose silence over salvation and punishment over peace when peace betrayed him, with Unforgiven. Clint didn't just close a chapter in westerns. He buried the myth of clean heroes. He replaced it with something far more unforgettable, a man who doesn't kill because he wants to, but because no one else has the stomach to do what's right when it's hardest.